in all honesty, the worst thing that can happen is you lose your life. And the chances of that happening in daily interactions is very slim. So if that's the worst that can happen, then, being turned down, facing rejection, not getting the sale is just a hiccup in the road. And what we're supposed to do is learn what it is that makes us fear moving forward. And once we learn what that fear looks like.
Hello. Welcome to another knowledge bomb episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential and together change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Branch Isole, author of 22 books. He is known around the world for contemporary short stories that reveal emotions and issues often experienced, but not always voiced. If this is your first time joining us, please consider subscribing and hit that notification bell and hit that like button. This will be greatly appreciated in helping getting out this content to great leaders and great individuals like yourself. Please help me welcome Blanche with 5 motivators behind every decision. Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
Life is about relationships. And, the idea is for us to grow in and through our relationships. That's why we partner up with someone else who can share their strengths with us to help our weaknesses, right? We're trying to move forward together. And experiential growth is real simple. It's growing beyond where you've been. But the real key to it is timing. And people, this is how you can tell whether or not growth is happening. It's the time between the thought and the action. So let me give you an example. In my prior life, when I was, all about me, and I was in that struggle to succeed, my wife and I used to have some disagreements, and I used to take it personal. This is tough for a lot of men because we always want to be right. And the truth is, women in general are more well-rounded than we are, and they look at things much differently. So in my quest to always be right or be the one who had the last word, if we had a disagreement, I would take it personal and I would shut down. And I could shut down for days at a time. And what I finally realized was I was trying to blame her or make an excuse for my own inability to come from the truth. And once I discovered that, every time I was in a situation that tested me or challenged me, I tried to reduce the time between my thought and my action. And what happens is you reduce that time from 3 days, to 3 hours, down to 3 minutes, and then down to 3 seconds. So when you've got to make that choice, instead of, that conversation that we have, whenever in those situations where we've got to make a choice or a decision, and the angel is on one shoulder whispering something and the devil's on the other shoulder whispering something. Right. Well, if you can reduce that time from this is what I think I should do to actually putting it into action that benefits not only you, but those, that you care about and love about, when you reduce that time, then you eliminate all the stress, all the pressure, all the struggle. That's when the growth happens, because instead of mulling over something, that I should have recognized 3 days ago, now I recognize it, in a matter of minutes. And by doing that, I've grown because I'm not repeating that same behavior, that I found myself stuck in, trying to, validate my decision or my choice or my actions. So it's a matter of reducing that time. And when you can reduce that time to, this is what I want to do and how am I going to accomplish that, and then you move to action, that's when the growth happens, because you're not stuck in that old pattern behavior And then when it doesn't work out, you start beating yourself up and going
Wow.
through all of those machinations. So you reduce the time, and by reducing the time, sure, you make some mistakes, you do, but you learn quickly. We learn more from our mistakes if we're paying attention, oftentimes, than we do from our successes. So it's a matter of reduce that time to, thought and then action. And then whatever the action result is, maybe I enjoy it, maybe I modify it, maybe I alter it, but I'm moving forward. And by moving forward, I'm not trapped or caught by my old pattern behaviors, which, ultimately are trying to hold me back. Otherwise, I'd be, moving ahead.
That is a load of knowledge bombs. That is so amazing.
And why it's so important to, reduce this time to discover who you are and where you're going and how you're going to get there is because our thoughts are the seeds, and from our thoughts come our actions, and from our actions come habits, and from our habits comes our character, and our character determines our destiny. And that's the 5 steps we need to be focused on to move forward. Success, nothing succeeds like success. And sure, you have some stumbles and you have some falters,
right,
but when we keep succeeding, we discover, more about ourselves and more about where we want to go. The greatest thing about manifestation, and you hear a lot about it today in abundance and those kind of things, life of abundance and manifesting things in your life. Well, the interesting thing about manifestation is unless you can see it, it can't happen because you don't know what it looks like. But if you can see it, if you can visualize it in your mind, say with your podcast, then as you go down that path, every time that you experience something that reinforces that path that you're on and that desire, that image, you come closer to succeeding the outcome. If we can't see it, then we don't see the signs and the markers on the path. If you know what that end goal for you looks like in your mind, sure, it may change, but it's only going to change to be better. Because as you proceed down that path, you're going to notice the signs and markers that will keep you towards that goal.
Right.
The interesting thing about the 5 motivators is they're the same for everybody, no matter what situation we're in. And you're always motivated by at least one of these, sometimes 2, depending on the scenario. But they're need, want, status, love, and fear of loss. And with every choice or decision we make, one of those is actively moving us to make a choice or decision. The key is recognizing what the potential consequences may be of those 5 that I just mentioned. Fear of loss is the greatest. It's the one that has the most strength. Fear of loss, the greatest fear of loss, of course, is our lives. But if you think about your daily life, you often encounter this fear of loss. Every advertisement for every product that you are watching or hearing about in the media, the kicker at the end is the fear of loss. If you don't act today, you're going to miss this discount. If you don't respond in the next 30 minutes, we can't put you on the list, whatever it might be. So that's the motivation to get people to move to action is you are going to lose something. And your fear is, I don't want to lose it, so I better act. The way you can overcome fear in general is to, number one, realize that you're not alone. Everyone in your life, everyone on this planet has insecurities. They have things that make them stumble and fall. We often hear people, stories about people who overcome adversity, right? They were down in the dumps and they picked themselves up and they got back to the top. Well, what you do is you put that fear of loss away. You let it go. because in all honesty, the worst thing that can happen is you lose your life. And the chances of that happening in daily interactions is very slim. So if that's the worst that can happen, then, being turned down, facing rejection, not getting the sale is just a hiccup in the road. And what we're supposed to do is learn what it is that makes us fear moving forward. And once we learn what that fear looks like, then it's easy to overcome it. Everything in the universe is in balance. So for every positive, there's a negative. So for every negative fear factor that you can come up with why you're going to fail or be rejected, there's an opposite that you can do to eliminate or reduce that fear. You have to overcome fear. And the way to overcome fear is to head it face on. FDR said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And that's what it is. It's a mental thing. It's really not something physical until it becomes physical. But up here is the mental. That's where the challenge takes place. That's where the conversation takes place. And when you realize that you can be as successful, as you can be, just like you might fail, well, you may succeed. And you start to look for the things that help you succeed. Once you do that, the fear no longer becomes a factor. It's just a non-issue. This is the same as, when you have a spiritual path that you're on. The farther you go down that path, the more you see it manifested in your life in blessings and rewards. And you get to a point where you don't even think about the negative stuff. You just go anticipating, I'm going to be successful here because I've prepared and that's who I am and I'm ready. And I may get a curveball, but that's okay too. I'll take it in stride. And it's about, putting that fear aside and getting on that road to success, or that path to success. It's our human nature to fear the unknown, but once we realize what's behind the veil, then we start to see the positives and the benefits instead of the fear of things.
Wow, that is another knowledge bomb.
Healthy relationships have 4 strong cornerstones. And they're real simple, but there's a couple of them we often don't think about. The first is love, because everyone is capable of giving and receiving love. And that's the foundation of every, home relationship, every intimate relationship, every partner relationship. The second is approval. We all crave approval. As children, we crave approval first from our parents, then from our peers. And finally, as adults, we crave approval from our world at large. The third one is agenda. And this is the one that most people are unfamiliar with because they don't realize, but everyone who comes into your life has an agenda. They are trying to accomplish things in their life, and they're trying to see how you can help them. The reason so many people, miss this one is because people come into their lives and they automatically trust them. And oftentimes, they end up finding themselves in a very negative situation because they trusted that person too much before they knew that they actually had an agenda. That person came into their life wanting something from them and not necessarily want to give anything back. So there was no value exchange. And people have a hard time and often find out that others have an agenda for them, when it's too late. The fourth one is the one that's most often at risk, and yet it's the one that's the key to the other 3, and that's spiritual grounding. And that's the key to, having the relationship you alluded to, the personal relationship. Without spiritual grounding, our natural focus and instinct is solely on the things and the ways of the world. We were born into the world, and that's what we've known since childhood, basically, since our formative years. And so we sort of get buried under layers of the world the farther we go and the more we grow, in our age, in our chronological age. And when you are lacking that spiritual grounding, then everything you see relates only to the world. And this is like the fear factor we talked about. When you're spiritually grounded, you have a balance, because when you have, for Christians, when you have the Spirit of Christ within you, you have the Spirit of truth within you. And that's what John 16:13 tells us. Yeah. When we invite Jesus into our lives, he sends the Spirit of truth to live with our spirit in our soul. And once we have the Spirit of truth, all of a sudden the veil is lifted and we see the truth in our world. And we also see the truth in our own world. And by now seeing the truth, we understand that there's a moral and an ethical implication to all of our choices and decisions. Up until that time, you know, we face everything in the world. It's either right or wrong. You know, we grew up as 2-year-olds finding out what no meant, and that right and wrong sort of come up to us as a concept of reward and punishment. And that's reinforced on us every day because our legal system is fundamentally right or wrong, but its action is actually reward or punishment. And so that's what we associate, you know, with. And so all of our actions are either to get a reward or to avoid punishment. And as long as that's where our focus and our mental place is, then we're always thinking about what's in it for me. How can I get a reward, or how can I avoid punishment? When we get the Spirit of Christ within us, that fourth pillar of our healthy relationship, and we now see the truth of the world, not only do we recognize the truth, but we also recognize the falsehood and the lies and all the fabrications. And now when I make a decision, having that knowledge, all of a sudden my decision takes on a moral or ethical factor. And when I decide morally or ethically, I'm deciding not only for myself, I'm deciding for my family, I'm deciding for my neighborhood, I'm deciding for my country, you know, I'm deciding for my world. And without that spiritual grounding, without that fourth cornerstone, the relationship, you know, is either A, bound to struggle, or B, bound to crumble. Because, you know, it's either all about me or it's all about us. And so when you've got that spiritual grounding, that's why when two people in a relationship are spiritually grounded, it's much easier to move forward. When one is spiritually grounded and the other one has no interest, you know, in a spiritual relationship with God, then they're not interested in a spiritual relationship with their partner. And that just doesn't work. It means, you know, two things at odd constantly. And that's why the spiritual grounding part is so essential, you know, to a healthy relationship.
Wow. I want you to do this real quick. So that the practical in your business relationship with you writing and having someone to take care of everything else.
Well, she loves to do it. You know, that's just the kind of person she is. What's interesting is, you know, for the first 40 years of my life, I was of and in the world, and in a big way, both within the law and outside of the law. And when I got on the spiritual path, it took me 10 years to get to square one. It wasn't like, okay, I get it, I'm a believer, let's do this. I had 10 years of pretty tough challenges, homelessness, out of work, I lost everything, you know, so I went through that struggle. And when I met my wife, we met online, actually, which was kind of interesting. We didn't get to see each other, so we corresponded. And when you write to somebody, it's really interesting because it's not like you can do the 20 questions at the bar and go forward. You know,
right.
You have to ask questions and you have to answer questions. And how you write tells a lot about how you think. And so we corresponded, you know, and we thought, okay, this looks like a pretty good match. Well, we met and we got married 4 days later.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
for us, it was a God thing. We knew, and I have to tell you that there's no way I would be where I am today without her,
Mm.
because God sent her into my life,
Yeah.
and she tackles every test and every situation, full hearted and ready to go. And she's a dig down kind of person, so she details and details and details. She doesn't take anything at face value. She checks it out, and so I never have to worry, that I'm going to make a mistake in business because I don't have to deal with it. That's who she is. That's what she loves to do. And, for us, it works. But for us, it was a God thing. And we both knew it right off the bat. In all honesty, we have only been away from each other for 5 weeks in the last 22 years. Ever
Wow.
since we met, we have always worked together.
Amazing.
Even when I was doing the writing and we had other jobs, we always worked as a team and a partnership. So,
That is
it
beautiful.
just so blessed. I wouldn't be here today without her, and she gets all the credit.
Yeah.
Um,
That is beautiful. That's a beautiful story. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And this is definitely the power of relationships, because if you wasn't lined up to be the man that you are today, it wouldn't have worked out. So awesome. God allowed you all to find each other in that right season. Because I'm pretty sure in a certain season, you probably could admit that I would probably messed it up if it was 20 years earlier or something like that. So this.
yeah, I did mess it up a bunch in the first 4 years. So, yeah, I can never press upon people enough. The key to your life is having a spiritual relationship with the Lord. It's that simple. And
Absolutely.
everyone who is on the path finds that to be true.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. All of us believers at one time were not believers.
Yeah.
And we were in that day-to-day struggle and
Yeah.
pressure and stress, just like everybody
Yeah.
now. And yet, the further on the path we go, the more we see God working in our lives,
Mm.
For our benefit, because our desire is to emulate his character and nature, to become more like him. And if you talk with people, Christians on the path, when you meet another Christian, you automatically recognize that person as you talk
Absolutely.
with them,
Absolutely.
because they've experienced the same kind of tough times that you experienced before you came to Christ.
Yeah.
And now you find that they automatically recognize, what you're doing in service to him or in his word. And you just don't know about that part of the path unless you get on that part of the path. And that's what's so difficult for people. I don't want to give up control. I'm not sure it's for me. I'm comfortable being miserable in my life. I don't want to take that leap. And yet, the love of God is so great. He requires nothing of us in life except, before we take our last breath, we will have to decide if he is who he says he is,
Mm.
and if his son is who he says he is.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. And the sooner you make that decision and make that choice, he'll start working in your life.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
what he does. And it's all about his unconditional love.
Yeah.
God is like a loving parent who only wants good for us. And, when we are disobedient, the world calls it sin. But when we turn our backs on God, he still loves us, but he says, okay, I understand. I guess you need to go through this experience and see what the results are. And I'll be here when you get to the other end. And then you decide. And that's what he does with every choice and every decision we make. He gives us free will to choose. Are we going to, walk the world's path and
Yeah.
embrace the things of the world? Or are we going to walk a path that leads to him and embrace the things that he has for us? He says, I know your needs before you do. And if God's word is true, then everything he says is true. And if he knows my needs before I do, then I don't have to worry about it. I just have to do the leg work and keep focused with him in my life and know that he's there. Again, that's the joy and the blessing of having the Holy Spirit in your life. He will show you the consequences of your choices before they ever happen. And people ask me, how can he do that? He's going to show me the blessing, right? No, he's not going to show you the blessing, but he's going to show you what the consequence of making that choice following the world is going to be.
And I definitely agree with you. It's these things, I mean, it just, and to me, it fuels me in a way, you know, to be, that's how I know for a fact. I'm like, this is what we're called to do. Because when you start doing it, when you start giving, when you start pouring out, that's what fills us up. And it's like all this stuff, you know, chasing the houses and cars and success. And I've done all that. And I got away from it. But when I did that, I was chasing something, but I felt like I was on a treadmill. I wasn't being fulfilled. But now here I am. I'm fulfilled. It's just so fulfilling. And the fulfillment in it is to do more of it. It's like, I want to do more of it. I want to give more. I want to help more people. Blanche, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And being on the Lead to Greatness show on today. If someone wants to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
Oh, thanks, Cedric, for asking. Sure. All of my stuff is real easy to access. You just put my name in. I've got a website, I've got a YouTube channel, I've got all these podcasts. It's all under Branch Isole. So even if you just Google my name, I'm the only one, so you don't go through a lot of pages. It'll immediately come up, and links to everything I've written or done is right there for you.
Wow. Thank you. On behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, we want to thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us all.
My pleasure, brother. It's been just an honor to be here with you.
So we want to thank you for joining us today on the Lead to Greatness podcast. And if this is your first time, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that like button, hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of these amazing episodes. And if you're on iTunes, go ahead and rate the podcast and leave a review. That helps get the word out to great leaders and entrepreneurs like yourself. So we want to thank you for joining us today. So remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace.